Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
It's midterm rental time, and that means we're going to talk about hospitality. Specifically, though, we're going to talk about building trust with midterm rentals through corporate housing with Vivian Yip, the founder of Hestia, seeking to become the trusted brand in midterm rentals. You are going to learn a lot from this episode. Get ready. Let's go. This is episode 145 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Vivian Yip. Vivian is a public speaker, hospitality coach, midterm rental entrepreneur, and the founder of Corporate Rentals USA by Hestia. That is Vivian's vision for the future of corporate rentals. Vivian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you and get some more expertise on this midterm rental space, but specifically corporate housing. But I want to start at your beginnings because your beginnings are eerily similar to mine. Weren't you a rent collector for your parents back in the day?
Oh, yes, I was. My parents, they were very intentional about wealth building. And growing up, I went to so many open houses. We collected rent. We've dealt with meth houses in Vancouver, Canada. Yeah. I spent my childhood going to an apartment collecting quarters from the laundry machine. And so by the time I was 9 years old, I already knew how to roll $10 worth of quarters.
Me too.
Yeah. So that's awesome. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, my dad was a single family investor and commercial investor. And from 3, 4, 5 on, I was walking dumps and collecting rent. And when I was in college, I learned how to collect rent. And he had a lot of back tenants because he was too nice. So he told me, if you can get the rent, you can keep half of it. And that's how I kind of figured out how to deal with tenants early. What was it like for you starting to understand real estate and tenancies at a young age, and how much did it help you when you really got into it later?
That's to be honest, my parents almost didn't teach me anything.
They just brought you.
they just brought me along, and I think it was like my first investment property I was 24 years old. This is in Markham, Ontario. So if you're familiar with the Greater Toronto area, real estate has gotten unbelievably expensive now. Yeah. But back then, my first property was a single family home with a basement studio. So I was house hacking by the time I was 24. And luckily, I didn't ever have any problems until I rented to a coworker. Yeah. So that's a lesson learned. Don't rent to people you know, because it makes that relationship even harder and more awkward. But generally speaking, it's just been a journey for me. My parents didn't really teach me anything until I asked them, I think I was in my 30s, exactly how did you grow your portfolio? And they're like, oh, we never told you? I'm like, no, you didn't tell me anything. Yeah. And the secret sauce there is they said they would find a property, they would buy it, rent it out. And in about 5 years, that property would appreciate and they would refinance it, cash out, and buy another one. And that's what they did, one rental at a time.
Yeah. Do you think you learn through osmosis, though, sometimes? Because my dad was so annoying growing up about trying to overteach me, when I didn't want to learn until I was about, 20 or so. But I knew that I knew more about real estate than everybody else when I started. So when I went to get my first property, I was like, wait, I know a lot. Did you feel like that when you got your first property? Did you feel like you were starting over because you were on your own?
I felt like I was on my own, but I felt comfortable because I knew that I always had a sounding board. But like any young person, you don't want to listen to your parents or ask them for help because because it's like they don't know anything, you know.
Yeah.
So I really didn't intentionally have those conversations with them until I was in my 30s, and I bought my investment property in 2015 here in Austin. Not even consulting them, I was like, well, that's what my parents did, so I'm just gonna do it. I took my first
Yeah.
check from working at Apple, and I spent $40,000 on a down payment for a property, not really understanding or knowing what I was getting into. I just felt like it was the right thing to do because that's what my parents did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you picked the right market, because if you look at it now, Austin still comes up. But where I always say to people, like, man, you should have been in there in 2010 to 2015, and you were. So,
Yeah.
how did you know that Austin was going to explode like it did, or was it just you were there and it seemed like a good idea?
I had no idea it was going to explode. I knew that Austin was, getting more popular per se, but I had no idea it was going to explode the way that it did.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's made it tricky, I guess, for people who still look at it as a great place to invest, because you can still make money there, but you can't make the money that you made in appreciation from 9 years ago.
Yeah, like in 2015, this 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that I bought in Round Rock, Texas, in a great neighborhood, great school district, I paid $202,000
Oh
for
my
it.
God, that's
Right, that
crazy.
same house, I refinanced it after 3 years, 3.5 years, and they reappraised it at 405.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
I pulled
but
out all
that
my down payment, and I'm zero in now.
yeah, and that's real estate in a nutshell for people who sometimes new investors are looking for that quick fix, and it's like, no, this is way quicker than our parents probably achieved appreciation that you can
Yeah,
do in some of these markets. But that shows you just 3 years of buying a house that you lived in can turn around and double your money, which is again similar to what I did. I was really good at buying houses, so I like single families. I would live there, then I would leave, and I was like, well, wait, this seems pretty easy if I can just identify neighborhoods that I want to buy in first, and not, buy the shiniest object out there. I wanted
yeah.
to go back though to your first purchase. How did you know to live in the basement? Because house hacking wasn't a thing then. Like, no one knew it was called house hacking. So what led you to think like, hey, this just makes sense?
Actually, I didn't live in the basement. I lived upstairs.
Oh, okay. Well,
And
yeah, that's smarter though, because that's getting the enjoyment out of it as well, not your traditional house hacker living in the basement of a 2+1 and
yeah,
without a stove and making money though.
I didn't know. My mom was just like my mom was she retired from the banking industry and became a realtor, and this opportunity came up. She's like, "This is the house you need to buy." I was like, "Well, okay, I'll buy it." So I did.
Yeah,
Even though it was in the suburbs and I was in my 20s and it wasn't exactly, the lifestyle that I wanted, but
yeah,
it was very attractive to know that even though my mortgage payment was like $935 a month, that I could collect $650 from the basement. I was like, well, that totally makes sense.
yeah. You're
So it
barely
was,
paying to live there.
yeah. So it was an easy choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when house hacking became popular, people have kind of created all these scenarios for multifamily, but they forget about these traditional mother daughter or basement setups, which you can do mostly legally. And sometimes people can do them not necessarily illegally, but to people that they know, in the mother daughter, if depending on the towns. Do you think that mother daughters are still a huge asset? I love them. I think people are missing out on them because they have always that private entrance.
I still house hack
Yeah.
and I have that mother-in-law suite. So I live
Yeah.
in this gorgeous neighborhood and we have travel nurses as my housemate kind of. It has a separate
Yeah.
entrance. It's a garage studio that's joined only by a roof line, and I've had that constantly rented out since I've been here 3 years ago.
3 years ago, did you start though with midterm right away with travel nurses?
I started almost 5 years ago. I never started with travel nurses. I started with temporary housing right from the get-go.
Corporate or insurance or both?
Actually, it was offline, not on Airbnb. Like I
Yeah.
started as a short-term rental and then the pandemic hit. And then I realized how exposed my business was because I was only on Airbnb.
Yeah.
And for anybody that's been on Airbnb for that long, they know that during the pandemic, Airbnb was canceling reservations for people. And I was like, I'm not going to let anybody control my revenue. So
Yeah.
I snoozed my listing, even though I had like 53 reviews or whatever. And I went offline. I went on the MLS, I went on Furnish Finder, and I had a family that was relocating from California, building a house. So they moved in for 3 months. And then I got a 7-month contract for a construction team from Dallas. And that's when I was like, holy smokes, I think I found the
Yeah.
secret.
Yeah. And I think you're with your mom being a realtor, obviously I'm licensed. I've always thought that midterm is really, really sneaky for, I live in an extremely hot market in New Jersey. There's a tons of people who want to sell their house and they want to get all the best money that they can. And then they still need to look for a house after. And this
Yeah.
is the perfect option. Short term, they're going to overpay. If there's midterm available, they can say, hey, 3 months, hopefully we'll find something. So you're definitely
Mhm.
ahead of the curve on that. When you were between the time you were younger collecting the coins from the laundry and then when you got that first one at 24, when did you start to think real estate could be a thing? Because I know you were working at Apple. Where was the transition part where you said, hey, I'm eventually think I can leave Apple, and then eventually you did?
Oh man, this is a long journey. So 9 months after I bought that property in Canada, I was relocated to go work at the Tetra Pak office in Chicago. So
Mhm.
I became an accidental landlord twice over because now I had the basement to rent and then I had upstairs to rent. But I made $100,000 5 years later selling that property. So then I was like, oh, that's awesome. But I was in a different phase of my life. I was in my heading to my 30s at the time.
Yeah.
And it was a different time. We didn't have social media. We didn't have Facebook. It was a very lonely journey to think about real estate investing, even though I'd
Yeah.
read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all that stuff. So instead of seeing that money as an investment like house hacking, I ended up buying a condo in Chicago and I closed on it in April of 2007.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
having ridden the cycle of economics, you'll know that that was the height of the market. And within like 9 months, I think I lost 30 to 40% of the value of the condo that I bought.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant and then again became an accidental landlord, bought a place in the suburbs and ended up renting that place out at a $600 a month loss, thinking,
The condo.
thinking
Yeah.
that the market would turn around. And that's when I learned how much location matters
Yeah.
because it was in a gentrifying neighborhood. And anyways, long story short, I really didn't switch my mindset over to real estate investing with intention until 2017 when I was like,
Mm.
my kids were toddlers and every day was the same grind. I couldn't see myself living this corporate life for the rest of my life. And I thought, you know what, 5 years from now, I would love to have a life where I could travel, I could spend time with my kids, I wouldn't have to ask or be denied for a day off. And that was my motivation for going all in real estate.
Yeah, but before that, I found that people who have a few properties along the way, sometimes they don't even consider themselves real estate investors because they're just working another job. It's just like a side hustle thing, because I don't think I ever really thought of myself as a real estate investor. And I've been doing it for 30 years, and then 10 years ago when I got my real estate license, people were like, oh, you know a lot. I'm like, well, I've been investing my whole life, but I never really called myself an investor because it wasn't my primary job. Did you
Right.
suffer from that as well?
Well, I'm definitely intentionally calling myself a real estate investor, but I don't think I
Now.
switched. Yeah, I don't think I switched
Yeah,
over until we started flipping houses, right? When we got the
right.
first, second deal done, I was like, we're doing this with intention. We are real estate investors.
Yeah. What was the mindset shift? It was just part of like for kids, you want to spend more time with your kids, and the 9 to 5 doesn't really work with that.
Yeah, I think the shift was that I wanted to have money. I wanted to have money to enjoy life. Like money for me is not about buying material things. Money for me is about buying experiences.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't have enough money to do those things. So I ended up selling a lot of my stocks so that I could take a chance on us. And that turned out to be a great bet because we were able to utilize our skill sets of for me was, analytical stuff. My husband's super handy, and combined, we ended up becoming a really great team. I know a lot of husband and wives struggle working together, but we found really great momentum between the two of us because we learned to stay in our lanes.
Yeah, that's funny though, because the episode before this was Tyler and Zosha Madden, and they said the same thing. Like the dual personalities really work as a couple, and hopefully that can give advice or encouragement to other people who are like, "Hey, our skill sets don't match." That's good when you're trying to do this real estate thing on your own. Because if you're both good at the same thing, no one's going to be good at the paperwork. If you're both good, at the
Oh,
at the
we
at
both
the
kind of
actual
hate the paperwork.
construction. Yeah, I mean, nobody enjoys that except accountants.
Yeah, the first thing that I outsourced was my bookkeeping because neither one of us
Yeah.
like to look at that. So,
Yeah, well, let's talk hospitality a little because I know that's been a big part of your journey. When along the voyage of starting to rent out places and then getting into short or midterm, did you realize that hospitality was the key to success?
well, first of all, I had hospitality experience because I had an internship before I started college.
Mm,
And I loved it. I worked at a hotel. I went through a rotational program in Hong Kong where I learned the ins and outs of sales and marketing and front desk and concierge. And I really love that because I'm just the kind of curious person that likes to dive into many different things and get
yeah,
experience and hands on. And I always knew that I wanted to get back into hospitality, but wasn't sure how because I can't buy a hotel.
yeah,
But it's not about what you can't do, it's about what you can do. And when I came across our sixth flip, this is in 2019, I thought, you know what, this property would be perfect for Airbnb because it was in a non HOA neighborhood. It was really close to downtown Austin. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I'm like, it'll probably work. But I wasn't really sure at that time. We only had AirDNA and AirDNA was projecting a certain income. I was like, you know what? Again, what's the worst that can happen?
yeah.
The worst that can happen
Long-term
is that,
rental.
yeah, a long-term rental, or I could sell it. So when you have that, what's the worst that can happen mindset? The really worst that can happen is someone destroys your property or whatever it is. But when you come out ahead and those things don't happen, that's when you are happy.
Yeah,
You're delighted. You can become delighted that those things didn't happen, and it exceeds your expectation. So, to answer your question, I always knew I wanted to be back in hospitality. And I flourished because I loved welcoming guests. I loved sharing my experiences with my favorite restaurants and just helping them have a great experience while they're visiting Austin.
yeah. Do you feel, I mean, I've had a lot of short-term guests on, and everyone who's doing well in the game says the same things. The better amenities and the better services and one-to-one kind of commitment you make to the hospitality is what kept the people above the curve when everyone said, oh, short-term rental's dead and midterm rental's dead, for the last 2 years, which was most of us knew was completely ridiculous. But those with hospitality experience and a focus have really, really shined and continue to stay above, a kind of a bunch of these hedge funds who bought them thinking they could manage that.
Yeah, and it's not even just the hedge funds. It's a lot of people thought they could jump into the short-term rental game thinking it'd be quick money. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that happen in this business that maybe they never considered how much work it is to
Yeah.
organize cleaners and handyman. And when there's damages happening, how much work it can be to just fill the calendar, especially when you never anticipated for the flood of other people that are joining this business.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, and I hate to say this, but there are some really bad guests as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, on the bad guest front, what's the best vetting mechanism that you have for knowing, what, this person's not a good fit? Because I know that takes time. It took time for me back in the day to try to figure out like what things they were saying to say like, I don't want to book this, instead of like putting everything on like auto book and just hoping for the best.
So I think my previous experience in long-term rentals really helped me in this because you and I both know the key to having great tenants is screening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So in our strategy with my property management company, we do screening. So in our listing, we say that before you book, your reservation is not confirmed until you confirm your identity to us, not just to Airbnb, but to us. And we
Yeah.
also have auto host, which verifies and screens the guest for credit card fraud, past history, for criminal records, background check, all that kind of stuff. So it at least gives us some kind of indicator using AI technology on whether or not this has a risky profile or not.
Yeah, I think it's really important. My sister and I were doing short-term rentals 20 years ago, and I think we together developed a strict strategy that once we got the description perfect, like we knew we had everything in there. If someone asked a question before, we would just not book them. Because they always asking something that's in there, or like, do you have 3 play sets or something, or how many, I don't know, do you have enough spoons? You're just like, you're the person who's going to write a bad review. There's something in that. I love the security measures, of course, for the property because that's your asset. But I think over time, and I wonder if you agree, you start to learn the kind of oddities of what people are doing up front and what that means when they get there. If
Yeah.
you're asking 5 questions before you even show up, it's going to be really a terror dome when they get there, asking, how come the closet door is off the hinges,
Not only that, 99% of the time, if they're bargaining with you, they're going to be a tough guest
Oh,
too.
100%. And they're leaving you a 4-star review. They say, great, everything was great, perfect, but, the bed linens, they were one little spot off the side or something, just looking for a problem.
I still remember my very first reservation because, when you go online on Airbnb, your algorithm shoots to the top, and literally within 10 seconds, I got 3 bookings.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
had my price so low. It was like $65 a night just because I wanted to get the ball
Yeah,
rolling.
yeah.
And that person gave me a 3-star review for a 2-night stay because it was not of good value.
At
Are you kidding?
$65? Yeah. Did they need,
Yes.
they should just be lucky they have a closet.
Yeah, basically. Or a roof
Yeah.
overhead. Yeah, seriously.
But that's where I think I learned a lot too, and I'm sure you have, in terms of like really tuning up the description and, like you said, a lot of upfront vetting and just making sure, is this the right fit? I mean, and then when it goes to midterm, it's a little bit different because you're doing these off a major platform sometimes, or using Furnished Finder, which doesn't come with the vetting on the client. You have to do the vetting yourself. How have you
Mhm.
taken that to midterm and been able to kind of, use it when it's not a giant conglomerate in the middle?
The most important thing is to have a property management system. So I've used 2 of them and I'm testing a third now just to get, it's always important for me to see what's out there and understand who's leading the mark on this business. But let's talk about OwnerRez, for instance, right? OwnerRez is designed for the short-term rental vacation market, but I use them initially for midterm rentals because they have these features where you can take a security deposit using Stripe. You can do a credit card hold, or you can actually take the funds up front. The other thing is you can do a rental agreement in there that they can electronically sign. It's all part of the workflow, in
Yeah.
addition to collecting their ID and even their license plate. So it's really easy to enter the fields and set up all the programming for you to accept these mid-stay guests without that much risk. Then there's also Journey. Journey is another property management system where you can take direct bookings and they will go through the auto host process for you. And they basically, every reservation, they have to upload their ID, right? That way you're not left wondering who destroyed your place. You actually have someone's ID, right? That's the thing. If you're new to Airbnb or you don't use it, they hide that information from you. And if something goes wrong, their privacy policy says they can't share that information with you. So it's
Yeah.
really important for you to have that additional layer of protection because that guest is signing a relationship with Airbnb. They're not signing a relationship with you.
Yeah. I think there's something important to say about Airbnb. It's almost like Airbnb became short-term rental, but I was doing short-term rental before Airbnb existed. And I think, would you agree? Airbnb is a marketing channel. It's
Yes.
not the entity. Your asset is the entity. It's like you use Airbnb if you can leverage that to do better, which you can for short-term rentals, but most people aren't using it for midterm rentals, right? Because that's not the correct marketing channel that will help you make the most money and really find the best clientele that way.
Yeah. But I am testing another property management system now. It's actually free to use. OwnerRez was very expensive. It was, I think, $55 a month. And then Journey is $59 a month. But
Mhm.
OwnerRez, you had to pay for everything else a la carte. Like if you wanted Rental Guardian, it's a la carte. If you want Price Labs,
Right,
it's a la
right.
carte. If you want Remote Lock, it's a la carte. So it ended up becoming highly expensive, especially for midterm rentals when you're just collecting rent once a month. That is an expense that became super out of reach for us with the amount of properties that we have. So then
Yeah.
we switched over to Journey, and Journey's been pretty good. It's got a few things that I would wish we could improve on, but the support has been really good. But at $59 or $69 a month, all your other things are included, which makes it much more affordable than what it was at OwnerRes.
Yeah.
And then now I'm testing another one, which is completely free. And the reason why it's free is because every reservation needs to buy an insurance package, which I think totally makes sense because if you're taking offline reservations and you're worried about not having air cover, this
Yeah.
new property management system or this existing property management system will provide you the protection that you want, especially for a
Yeah.
midterm stay. $150, you get $25,000 in liability damage. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that is definitely a no-brainer. And I mean, generally across the board, midterms have seemed pretty stable. But again, it depends on how well you're vetting the people, because if they don't come with a fully filled out profile, on Furnish Finder with a bunch of reviews, I don't think as they do on Airbnb.
Yep.
Hey, this is Jonathan. Thanks for listening to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. On this brief interlude, I wanted to tell you that we have a mailing list. I actually don't love mailing lists. There's so much. This is not an automated mailing list where you get on a drip campaign. These are written once a month, will eventually be at once a week again by me, direct, and they're not spammy. So if you want to sign up for our mailing list, you can go to bit.ly/streamlined with a D mail. Bit.ly is bit.ly/streamlined mail. See you there. So how did you come to connect corporate housing really as an entity to your business at Hestia, which I know those are connected and really running that? Where was the influx of corporate housing, and what does that mean, though, corporate rentals, for people who don't know?
So just to clarify, Corporate Rentals USA is the website, the platform. And right now, I mean, it's a new business. It's still in its infancy, right? The tech side is still in development, but everything runs in the background. The brand is Hestia, and Hestia is the first brand in Corporate Rentals USA. And what I found was that Airbnb or Furnished Rentals has a huge opportunity to enter into the corporate market. So having relocated twice in my career, even though I came from a single family home, the first time I was by myself, the second time I was with my family, when I relocated, they put me in an apartment. So the second time it was harder because I had my 2 kids. I had a nanny with us. I had my dog. I had my husband. And we were stuffed into a small 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. And I was like, well, why didn't they just put us in a house? Well, turns out is that the only inventory really that's out there are Airbnbs. But there's been so much bad experiences with these corporate housing companies trying to rent these Airbnbs that they don't use them anymore. Because if they're relocating someone from Apple or from Google or Microsoft, that's a business to business relationship and a reputation they have to protect.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what are the gaps? Well, the gap is that when you walk into an Airbnb, there's a huge difference in the amenities available. You might have a property with I've walked into properties, short-term rentals, where there's 2 glasses or 4 months, right? Or maybe all the cookware is all scratched up. There's just a difference in experiences. And just because someone has a superhost status doesn't necessarily mean that the property is great for an extended stay.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, superhost is pretty easy to get. I mean, not easy, but it's not as hard as people think, I don't think.
Yeah, it's really easy. The thing is, if in a short-term rental, if I'm committing to sleep on a futon, and I have a great time with my friends, I'm probably going to give a 5-star review because it was fine.
Yeah.
Right. But in a midterm stay, I want people to feel comfortable that they're committing to 30, 60, 90 days, and they're going to be in a property that they enjoy like their own home. So there should be a standardized set of amenities. There should be a standardized experience, as simple as having access to a laundry room. Right? You've been to short-term rentals where you can't even access the laundry room, or a garage that's been stuffed full of the owner's stuff and you can't access it, or sometimes the master bedroom closet is locked for owner belongings. Yeah. I think if you're going to pay a premium for a midterm stay, the whole house should be accessible.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that goes to what you're saying. When you're getting moved with your family, you want to at least have the feeling of home, even if it's temporary. And that's why midterms are so important. You have to be there to provide that, hey, this isn't going to be your forever home. But while you're here, and you're going to be here for a little while, could
Right.
be, like you said, 30, 90 days, 13 weeks, whatever it is. That's a pretty solid stay. You want to make sure everything is there, because I guess it's very frustrating, I know, as being a guest, like you said, to show up and then have things not available, that
Right.
you thought were going to be available. And I think on the long stays, it's even more important. If you're only there for 2 days and there's one colander and you can't find it, like, you'll be okay. You'll be able to drain the pasta some other way. May not get you a great review, but you're sitting down for 13 weeks, or it's going to be an issue if you can't find something or you don't know how to work
Those
something.
those minor inconveniences on a short-term stay become major inconveniences during an extended stay.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so our solution at Hestia for that is we do a self audit for all of our hosts. They do a self audit on their amenities. It's a predetermined list that we provided them, and they close the gaps by making those purchases. The secondary thing is we send an inspector to every single property to check that property before they get certified as a Hestia home,
that's awesome.
right? And that inspector is trained to corporate housing standards, because even though we're only in 4 or 5 corporate housing supply chains right now, my goal is to get into every single one of them.
Yeah, yeah,
And we
that makes
can't do
sense.
that. Yeah, we can't do that unless we vet them.
Yeah, I mean, you're vetting it the right way, because building needs to be good, unit needs to be good, and like you said, you're giving that list. Hey, don't miss these things. This is what people need based on my experience. So, like you said, fill the gaps. Maybe you have most of this stuff, but don't leave any out, because that's the thing. This is just documented as what people need, and then maybe technology changes and something comes along where, hey, now we're seeing that people need monitors, and then you add that, because it is a growing space depending on how long people are staying and why they're staying, in terms of what they might need.
100%. But the most important things are, is there a dedicated workspace? How fast is the Wi-Fi
Yeah,
speed?
for
Like,
sure.
our inspectors will even log into the Wi-Fi and check the
Yeah,
speed. They check all the appliances to make sure the washer and dryer is functioning. The HVAC goes cold, it goes hot, all the dishwashers. I mean, there's a huge checklist. It takes
yeah.
4 hours for up to a 4-bedroom home. And it's really so that we can qualify the home and make sure that it is providing the brand experience that we are promising.
Yeah, well, you're coming in with a standard of excellence that can then, again, you can take people, because you want to grow into other markets. And the best thing about growing is like that. They can say, oh, I stayed at a Hestia unit in Charleston, but now I'm going to Austin. Do you have anything in Austin? Yes, actually, we do. Because some people will move, who are on contract jobs. They'll move for 4 months here and 4 months there. Is that your long-term goal, to be able to provide these assets so people can go from one to another and know that no matter what city they're in, they're going to get the same standards of excellence through your
That's our
company?
goal. Yep, that's our goal. I mean, I think people are forgiving enough to say that each property is going to look different,
Yeah,
and they might have different bedding or they might have different pillows, but ideally they'll accept that as a unique characteristic of the
right.
property, but the amenities should be the same and the experience should be the same.
Yeah.
In the
And just on a comparison for the listeners between midterm and short term, now we're seeing a ton for short term, of course, which is like experience related, meaning, pickleball courts and video gamers. Things like that are less important to your midterm rental guests most of the time, right? Because you're trying to maximize functional space for people who are staying for a long time. So you do need these things, separate workspaces or extra things that are going to be more appropriate for a long term stay, right?
Yeah, I think the pool tables and the pickleball courts and the accent walls and murals outside your wall, those don't really matter anymore. In fact, I think if I stayed in a property that had all those things, I would actually get annoyed. Like, I just want something very simple and
Yeah.
clean and comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, especially same for me. Like, I don't need all the jazz. I mean, I want the stuff that I want. I can see if you're building it up and you have, like, a mountain property and you play into that. Yeah, but it does seem weird to create like an over experience on just like a regular condo. It's like, just make
Yeah.
it super functional so someone can be happy while they're there. And for a lot of people, just we talked, briefly about travel nurses, they're barely there. they're working a lot and then they're going to come home and then they're going to go out. So they don't really need all the stuff. They just need, Wi-Fi, like you said, that's super fast, and all the kitchen things that they need. Everything else will be fine as long as it's clean, updated, and looks good and caters to
And
that.
quiet and safe. For
Yeah,
nurses,
yeah.
quiet and safe.
Yeah, really important. And yeah, how do you make sure that those people are comfortable with the areas? Because all of my short-term rentals over time have always been in areas where it wasn't really a question. But in some areas, you're just like, this one might just not be for everyone. Or like maybe a single person doesn't want to be in this area. How do you account for that as you grow your overall portfolio of options to make sure people really understand, if they're going in? I can use Brooklyn as an example because I grew up in Brooklyn, and you could be in Brooklyn Heights or you could be in Bed-Stuy. I like them both, but someone else, coming from either out of the country or from California might not understand what they're getting in Bed-Stuy.
Yeah, that's a super good question. The first step in our vetting process, because we are like Hestia is a professional host program only. Unfortunately, because of our commitment to the people and the people that we want to use our business, is that we're only working with properties and hosts that have experience. So the prerequisite is that they need to have at least 1 year of experience. They need to have superhost status. And from that point, we start reading all the reviews. When we read the reviews, we look at things like, what have guests said? Why did they have a negative review? How did they respond to those reviews? And we see if that they're a good fit for the program. And I find that the reviews can often mention that maybe there was homeless on the street, or maybe they didn't feel safe. Those are things that can help give us indicators on whether or not the property would be a good fit for us. Because when I went to the Corporate Housing Providers Association meeting, that was CHIPA conference. It's for corporate housing in February.
Yeah.
The feedback that I got was there's been times where people book Airbnbs and they had a terrible experience because they didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Right? Safety and security is number one. And so the best properties in corporate housing are A and B neighborhoods.
Yeah. So at Hestia, are you guys looking for other people to kind of take over and then partner with them when they have existing Airbnbs? And are you also like operating your own units? How does that work?
So there's Hestia and there's Hestia 360. Hestia 360 is here in Austin. It's my full service property management company. So for anybody that doesn't have professional host experience, or for someone that wants to be completely hands off, that's the solution. But then there are other people that are that aren't in the Austin market, or they want to still run their property on their own. They can apply to our lead generation, education, and certification program, where they still have full control of their property, but we go ahead and do the certification. They can post that certification in their Airbnb listing, in their Zillow listing, in their Furnish Finder listing, whatever it is, that said, this isn't just a house with furniture in it.
Yeah.
This is a property that's been vetted to corporate standards.
Yeah. So that's that's a separate partnership. They find you or you find them through that, and then they're giving themselves like a nice upgrade that can rise above what else is out there.
Absolutely, because I can tell you one thing, there's a lot of people sliding in from short-term rentals into midterm rentals, and now you've got to find a way to differentiate your midterm rental amongst all the other midterm rentals out there. So are you going to be seen as a professional host or just another property with furniture in it?
Yeah, and going back to what we said, rising to the top in midterm isn't the same as short term, because you don't have to be catchy and it doesn't have to have that look. It's much different. The amenities have to be really tight, and the way that you manage the client has to be tight, and the information that you give out there. Because I can see someone just thinking, oh, I'll just do short term and I'll move it to midterm. Those two clientele are vastly different in terms of how they approach it. Short term can be super picky, but midterm are really going to generally be more professional, or more families, or like you said, more relocation, where those things really need to be in place. You can't have a mess up right when they got there. If they're traveling across the country just to show up and realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, that's a disaster.
Right. And I think people are willing to pay a little bit more money for that. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're the kind of person that would rather stay at a Hilton hotel as opposed to a Super 8, then you're the kind of person that may value that difference in price.
Yeah.
That brand standard.
Yeah, what do you think the future is, at least over the next couple years for midterms? They've definitely gotten more exposure, but do you worry that the same kind of thing will happen where short term, where people who should never be in the midterm game are trying to get in because I think it's a good business strategy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the success of midterms to begin with depends a lot on a location. So whereas short-term rentals might do significantly better if they're on the ocean or lake, those guys will always stand strong. If they're a short-term rental in a boring place, they could stand out as a midterm rental as long as it's in a good location.
Yeah,
So I think the future is knowing whether or not the property is going to be good, as well positioned as a furnished rental in general. And then
yeah.
I think the future is that there's a gateway that has not been opened up in the corporate housing space. And I'm determined to get us there.
Yeah, I like it. I really think I agree with you. When I look at neighborhoods now, I think not, especially with the affordable housing crisis in general, like not everyone that we know are going to be able to afford a home maybe until they're 30, 35, depending on their work, or maybe they don't want to because they work in a kind of travel type business, so they don't want to be chained down to that. This opportunity for midterms just in residential neighborhoods is huge because it's
Huge.
just not available. I know, from real estate, of all the people like we were talking about before who are just selling and have nowhere to go, or people who come into an area and they're like, they have money to buy a home, but they don't want to buy right away. They don't even know which part of town they like. And a
Right.
realtor can't fix that while they're coming from California and they have 1 month to move. Midterm is the perfect landing spot for them. But like you said, if they're coming from, a $2 million house in California, they don't want to get crammed into a little hotel in Austin. They want to live in a nice place.
Yeah. And same thing with insurance housing, right? People that
Absolutely.
have water damage or flood or fire, they're looking for that boring property that's really close to their primary home so
Yeah.
that they can stay on top of the contractors that are fixing their house. They don't have to
Yeah. And
go
still
out of
get
their way.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to drive out of their way to get their kids to school or their after school activities or seeing grandma and grandpa. So there is a huge need for midterm stays and quality
Yeah.
midterm stays. Here's what happens in insurance housing. Who does the insurance adjuster work for? If you have water damage,
Yeah. The
who
insurance
does
company.
they work for the insurance company. And the insurance company is probably likely trying to minimize their costs.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to understand that when you have an insurance claim, you need to look at your coverage to make sure that that you're able to maximize your benefits because you've already paid for them. So if they bully you into staying in a crappy place, you should challenge that. Like I have a friend of mine, she's a realtor here in Austin. She lives in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property in downtown Austin, beautiful home, and she has a mold issue in her house right now. And they tried to put her in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath fourplex.
Yeah. Little different.
Right?
Yeah.
A little bit different. Like a fourplex in that same area is not the like kind quality that she has
Right.
on her insurance policy. So
Yeah.
you really need to make sure that you're not bullied into staying somewhere that doesn't feel safe to you, is not like kind quality, as long as it's covered under your policy. Right. I always recommend that in your insurance policy, like go to your insurance policy tonight, make sure you have at least 20% of coverage A on your coverage D, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think everybody who knows will know. But that goes even to what we said, that there's a lack of inventory for this thing being available. Just
Mhm.
insurance companies can't, sometimes there's just nothing available. That's why we always get calls when I have long term rentals out for rent as a realtor and they're nice places. We always get calls from insurance companies like, hey, and they'll always overpay because there's literally nothing else out there. A lot of my
Yep.
landlord clients are, wow, I mean, that 6-month rental actually sounds pretty good, because they're going
Yeah.
to pay $1,000 more per month. And insurance tenants are generally great. They're coming because they had a fire or a flood in their house. Like they're just looking,
Yep.
like you said, for a place close by, but that's not available. I really believe in what you're doing because I really think that is going to help. There's not, everyone's not going to want to buy a house anymore. It's just too expensive. And as much as people talk about rates, they're not going down to 2 or 3 ever again because that was ridiculous. So
That was
now it's
that
like,
was a black swan.
Yeah. And it's like, so now we know, like, if we even get to 5, like, great. But some people may decide, like, listen, just based on my income and what I want to do with my life, I don't really want to lock myself in at a 7% rate to owning something when I can, kind of move around a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see. So, Vivian, where's the best place for people to get in touch with you?
The first place would be my Facebook group. It's called Midterm Rental Wealth with Vivian Yip. The goal of that group is to not only network, but to share the strategies that help me quit my full-time job. I know my most obvious feature is my bald head. My story there is that I actually was so stressed out from my job at Apple. Let me preface with Apple was a great career for me. But the particular project that I was on, I was launching iPhones during the pandemic. And there were days where I felt like I wouldn't wake up anymore. It was so bad that I decided to take a bet on myself and on the future of my real estate business. And I was able to quit through the power of midterm rentals. So that's really my goal, is to help everyone succeed in this business. And I want to reward people that do the best to get these contracts. Right.
Yeah.
So yes, Facebook is a great place. Join my Facebook group. They can also find me on Instagram at VivianYip_official. My website is vivianyip.com. If they want to hire me to do speaking engagements, I do a lot of inspirational speaking. And I also speak to a lot of realtors on how to grow their business.
Yeah. And go into that a little, because I know you have also launching a class for realtors that I think could really help as well. Because I've been in the game for, my whole life in real estate investing, been licensed for 10 years, and we're ahead of the curve working with investors, obviously, through this podcast and everything. But realtors don't know what they're doing. And I would say that not even 0.01% of realtors even know what midterm rentals are right now, much less how to utilize them to help other investors do well with them. So tell us about your course on that.
So the course is to teach realtors how to become an expert in their own market. And the reason why is because I've developed this expert reputation here in Austin. And last year, just by working with investors, I attracted $6 million in sales. But I wasn't even a realtor.
Yeah.
So I got my license toward the end of last year, and I gave all my leads to my husband, who practices in real estate. I am now licensed, but I was like, well, there's tons of realtors out there that are struggling right now because there aren't enough primary home buyers. They're all waiting for the rates to drop, but guess who's still buying real estate? Investors are. In fact, my friend Paul, who owns a mortgage company, he said that 37% of his applications right now are coming in from investors.
Yeah, we're recording on May 23rd, 2024. We have the looming commission adjustments in the business, which is only going to make it harder for real estate agents. And I've always said, as someone who's operated an investor-friendly business for years, the best reason to work with investors is because instead of buying a home every 7 to 10 years, they could buy 7 or 10 properties in 1 year, like you're saying. So this is an absolutely huge bonus for people. Where can they find that? Because I think that is a gold mine for someone who wants to specialize in working with investors and focus on midterm, short term, and how to get the property and how to help them do it, because they're going to be busy. Could be an absolute gold mine going into what we're going into, where buyers are going to be tougher to get and sellers are going to be all with the agents who've been doing it for years.
Yep. They can find the course information at vivianyip.com. And I've also dropped the link to the YouTube so that you can add that to this podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We will link to it all in the show notes. Vivian, thanks so much. This was a midterm masterclass, I believe, and I'm quite sure people are going to get a lot out of it. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm glad I could finally get you on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, that was Vivian Yip. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Wait, you have reached the end of the show. This is the part where you're going to get ready to check out, but I've actually changed this part. For over 120 episodes, you heard the same thing. Well, now I've changed it. I've thought about doing intros to the next episode, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. These are my pitches at the end. I've got nothing to sell you at all, but I do want to remind you that it really would help us if you support the podcast in the right way. All that means is subscribing to the podcast so you get it on Monday and Thursday, writing us a 5-star review if you believe that we deserve a 5-star review, sharing it with your friends, and being a participant in the Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing community. Soon there's going to be a new website launched. Maybe when you're listening to this, it's already going to be out there. That's where we're going to have collaboration. You're going to be able to see a lot from the guest. It is coming soon, and I just want to tell you, from me to you, I don't know how I got here, over 100 episodes. I'm so appreciative of you listening to the podcast and especially sticking around to hear this part. We'll see you next episode.